Hello everyone. So today lecture is based on international relations 2.1 United Nations and India's norms. So why news India has proposed reforms in United Nations via norms. So what is norms? New orientation for reformed multilateral system to determine a global order that best reflects contemporary realities. So firstly you have to know about UNSC. So it's a United Nations principal crisis management body, actually empowered to impose binding obligations on 193 United Nations member states to maintain international peace and security. So membership is in 15 members basically, in which 5 permanent members, collectively P5 with veto powers: China, France, Russia, UK and USA. 10 non-permanent members elected by United Nations General Assembly by a two-thirds majority. They serve 2-year non-consecutive terms, are not afforded veto power. So council's presidency held by each of members in turn for 1 month following English alphabetical order of member states' names. So tools for conflict management. UN Charter authorizes council to call on parties to seek solutions via negotiation, arbitration or other peaceful means. Failing that, it also empowers Council to take more assertive actions such as imposing sanctions or authorizing use of force. So peacekeeping missions are most visible phase of United Nations conflict management work. So more about news. So multilateralism is an institutionalized collective action by an inclusively determined set of independent states. So truly multilateral organizations are open to all states meeting specified criteria. Then the rules of multilateral organizations are publicly known and persist over a substantial period of time. So norms envisage reform in all three pillars of the current multilateral architecture, in bracket peace and security, development and human rights, with the UN as its center. It calls for a representative multilateral structure which is needed to address emerging challenges such as terrorism, radicalism, pandemics, threats from new and emerging technologies, and so on. India proposed the idea while presiding on the United Nations Security Council open debate on maintenance of international peace and security. It had taken over presidency of UNSC for December 2022. So in bracket final month of its 2-year term as a non-permanent member in council. So need for United Nations reforms. So lack of inclusivity and representation, lacunae in enforcement mechanisms, then changes in role, misuse of veto powers, hurdles in reforms. So firstly we read need for UN reforms में lack of inclusivity and representation. Basic structure of UNSC has remained almost unchanged since its foundation more than 75 years ago. So please refer graph. So UN members and UNSC membership, permanent members, then Security Council seats, then UN member states. So in 1945 permanent members are 5, Security Council seats are 11 and UN member states are 51. In 1965 permanent members are 5, Security Council seats are 15 and UN member states is 118. In 2022 permanent members are 5, Security Council states 15 and UN member states are 193. So with profound changes in realities of global community, Security Council is being questioned in terms of its legitimacy, effectiveness and representativeness. So no African or Latin American country has been given representation, while Europe enjoys over-representation among P5. More than 50 UN member states have not yet served on council. Lacunae in enforcement mechanisms. A recurring recurring criticism of the UN is its inability to effectively enforce mandates. UN is only as effective as member states allow, and members go to great lengths to ensure national sovereignty. Thus, it has become hostage to geopolitical competition and ideological struggles. UN's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been anemic. General Assembly passed non-binding recommendations. Other organizations also condemned Russia's actions, but punitive measures have been largely absent. Changes in role. Issues that UN and UNSC deals with have diversified over past 75 years, including peace building, conflict prevention, non-proliferation, counter-terrorism, and protection of civilians. Does not represent contemporary realities. UN is considered a reflection of power hierarchy of world after Second World War. World has been many changes since then. There is a rise of number of major economic and military powers like India, Brazil and Japan, etc. UN needs a council which can come up with effective resolutions and implement its decisions in a timely and efficient manner. So misuse of veto powers. Misuse of veto power is criticized for stalling governing capacity of UNSC. So P5 have been accused of misusing their veto to suit their national agendas at detriment of global security. For example, Russia vetoed resolutions on Ukraine. China has deployed it against India to safeguard Pakistan-based terrorists, etc. So proposal floated to reform UNSC. So G4 means Japan, Germany, India and Brazil. Then Uniting for Consensus Coalition or UFC. Azulvini Consensus represents Africa bloc. Then L69 group. So G4 envisages a council with a total membership of 25, 6 new permanent members, G4 and 2 African countries, and an additional 3 elected seats. Then Uniting for Consensus Coalition or UFC, led by Italy, coalition aims to counter G4 bids, called for a 25-member council, which would be achieved by adding no permanent members to council. Then Azulvini Consensus proposes 2 permanent seats and 2 additional elected seats for Africa. Permanent members would be granted all the prerogatives and privileges of permanent membership. L69 to enlarge the Security Council in both the permanent and non-permanent categories. New permanent members shall have the same prerogatives and privileges as P5, including right of veto. Then we have to discuss about hurdles in reform. Require huge support, lack of consensus, lack of support from P5. So hurdles in reform require huge support for amendments to enter into force. They need to have a 2/3 vote of support in UN General Assembly and 2/3 of Assembly's member states, including P5, ratified them. Lack of consensus. Though there is consensus that council should be expanded, substantial disagreements remain regarding the particulars. UN Charter has failed to provide criteria to become a permanent member of UNSC. Lack of support from P5. In past, the US voiced concern that enlargement that further weakened effectiveness of council. This problem will grow if new permanent members are granted veto power. Proposals to eliminate or limit veto through charter amendment will be received skeptically by current P5. So what is the way forward? Expansion of UN, conduct of business, focus on core issues, digital cooperation. So expansion of UN. The Secretary General's recommendation to focus reforms on 3 pillars. The UN development system, peace and security and management should be seen as a serious contribution to a process of change. The Security Council, including its permanent membership, should be enlarged to grant broader regional representation. So conduct of business. Procedural changes could enhance such a limited reform like the recent General Assembly resolution requiring a formal meeting after a permanent member cast a veto to debate the matter. Focus on core issues. 3 primary threats endanger the existence of humanity: climate change, infectious disease and nuclear weapons. A permanent coordinating platform should be set up to integrate the UN response across agencies, funds, and related organizations, and to act quickly, comprehensively, and efficiently in various fields. So, digital cooperation data is now a major economic asset, but its use and consequences go well beyond commercial issues to matters such as the quality of society and political systems. A UN led process in this regard would establish a much needed framework for data collaboration platforms to power a post COVID-19 recovery and achievement of the SDGs. Then our second topic is G20 Bali Declaration. So why in news? The 17th G20 summit concluded recently with the adoption of Bali Declaration. So more on news. The motto for this G20 summit was recover together, recover stronger. Also, India took over the presidency of G20 from Indonesia. So, what are the key highlights of the Bali Declaration 2022? So, the group highlighted its differences in the ongoing war in Ukraine and asked for Russia's complete withdrawal from the terrorists of Ukraine. The group also reasserted its commitment to secure global food security. The group welcomed the Black Sea Grain Initiative brokered by Turkey and UN. It is an MOU signed between Russia and UN Secretariat to allow export from Russia and Ukraine on food products and fertilizers to ease the tension in the region. The group has welcomed the provision of additional financial resources to assist in financial critical gaps in implementing international health regulations 2005. It also applauded the establishment of a new financial intermediary fund for pandemic PPR, the pandemic fund hosted by the World Bank. So these are the some infographics. So firstly, need for reforms in other multilateral institutions. West dominated procedural issues, backlash against globalization, funding gaps. So West dominated multilateral institutions are dominated by West, where European and American interests have prevailed. For example, institutions like International Monetary Fund condition loans on features like trade liberalization, private enterprise, and an overall reduction in public spending. So procedural issues with multilateralism concern the way that decisions are made and implemented. For instance, established multilateral organizations arguably do not meet standards of accountability and transparency that are considered legitimate. A recent example is ambiguity and lack of transparency in World Health Organization's investigation on origins of the COVID-19. So, backlash against globalization, signs of crisis of globalization can be seen in recent events like Brexit, trade wars among nations, recurrence of deadlocks in Doha round, paralysis of dispute settlement body of WTO due to blocked reappointments of judges in its appellate body, funding gap, despite growing share of official development assistance channeled through multilateral organizations and their resources fall short. So this is the infographic given in this magazine. G20. So G20 members are given here, which are Argentina, Australia, Brazil, China, European Union, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, United States of America, UK, Turkey, Japan, France, Italy, Canada, Russia, Germany. A premier forum for international economic cooperation founded in 1999 after Asian financial crisis as a forum for finance ministers and central bank governors to discuss global economic and financial issues. Annual summit held under leadership of a rotating presidency. No permanent secretariat. Past, present, and incoming presidents. Troika support presidency. Importance of G20. 80% of global GDP. 75% of international trade. 60% of global population. Structure of G20 preparatory process. G20 finance track or Sherpa's track. Outreach dialogue non-members B20, Think 20, Y20 NGOs. So G20 presidencies: India 2023, Indonesia 2022, and Brazil 2024. So this is the trocea. India's G20 priorities: green development, climate, finance and life, accelerated, inclusive and resilient growth. These are the priorities India's G20 है ना तो summit. तो accelerating progress on SDGs, technological transformation and digital public infrastructure, multilateral institutions for the 21st century, women-led development. So what is the significance of G20 in current geopolitical situation? So authority on major international economic issues, the G20 plays an important role in shaping and strengthening global architecture and governance on international economic issues. So it was particularly useful in steering the global economy after the global financing crisis and banking collapse of 2008. G20 has spearheaded reforms for international financial institutions, such as reforms to the international tax system through the G20 or OECD base erosion and profit shifting project, BEPS actually. So second significance is egalitarian grouping. It is an acceptable medium between the more elitist G7 and the 38 member organizations for economic cooperation and development, OECD. So over the past 2 decades, global economic balance has shifted and G20 has been seen as a more representative and egalitarian grouping of global leadership. So focus on low income countries. It is a platform where leaders commit to working with developing countries, particularly low income countries, by providing policy coherence, analysis, and practical tools to support growth and development. It recognizes that development and global economic issues cannot be tackled separately. Fulfillment of SDGs. Achievements include measures to drive sustainable growth and enhance global stability, cooperation on tax transparency, lowering cost of remittances, and increased female participation, etc. So, India's G20 presidency. The theme of India's presidency was Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, or One Earth, One Family, One Future. The theme affirms the value of all life on the planet Earth and also spotlights lifestyle for environment, both at the level of individual lifestyles as well as national development. India has created a new working group on disaster risk reduction to encourage collective work by the G20. India will host over 200 meetings in over 50 cities across 32 different work streams. So challenges for G20: internal governance challenge, no code of conduct established, multilateral commitments on aid and trade are faltering, geopolitical tensions, countries are turning to international lenders for bailouts, friction regarding climate change. So first challenge is internal governance challenge. So the group was intended to be more inclusive than G7. There is no formal membership criteria established still. The membership is based on the country's systematic importance to global financial markets and its contribution to GDP and trade only. There is no inclusive membership for the least development countries. Then no code of conduct established. There is a lack of code of conduct for members and clear enforceable rules that enable actions against members if they breach any rules. The group could have had a better say in the ongoing Russia Ukraine war if such codes were established. Multilateral commitments on aid and trade are faltering. This is because the role of the United Nations and the WTO in securing cooperation between donor and recipient country groups is losing centrality. There are now three socio-economic systems: the G7, China, Russia, and India, and the others, and they will jointly set the global agenda. Geopolitical tensions spurred by strategic competition between China and the US have increasingly threatened cooperation within the group. So countries are turning to international lenders for bailouts. This is the challenge of for G20. The G20 introduced a common framework for debt treatment ahead of its 2020 summit, but only three countries, Chad, Ethiopia and Zambia have requested debt relief under the framework. Others have gone towards organizations like IMF. Friction regarding climate change. China, India, Russia, and Saudi Arabia reportedly blocked an agreement on phasing out coal use and fossil fuel subsidies at a July 2021 meeting of environment ministers. Also, following the invasion of Ukraine, Germany and other G20 countries have reneged on previous promises to stop financing fossil fuel projects overseas. Way forward. Revised theoretical framework of macro and microeconomics, avoiding international fracturing, improving outreach, then establishing a code of conduct for the members. So first way forward is revised theoretical framework of macro and microeconomics. So G20 members need to incorporate lessons from the recent crisis to advocate policy actions based on economic theory that needs revision. Avoiding international fracturing, collective action and problem solving should be encouraged that transcends traditionally like-minded groups of countries. So, improving outreach, the G20 must promote equitable international economic agreements that provide a larger voice and role for the major economies of the global south. The G20 must also reach out to non-member states and non-state actors and give voice and consideration to their concerns, establishing a code of conduct for the members. By having an established code of conduct, the group can have a better say no controlling the acts of aggressive members like China and Russia. So our third topic is Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, BIMSTEC. So these are the basics, some basics given in the infographic. So why news? So experts have suggested that there is a need to look for better regional forum for the South Asian region. So BIMSTEC members, seven member countries, so Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka. So what is the basic objective of BIMSTEC? To enable environment for rapid economic development, to collaborate and mutually assist members on matters of common interest, to maintain close and beneficial cooperation with existing international and regional organizations, to endeavor to eradicate poverty from the Bay of Bengal region, to establish multidimensional connectivity, promote synergy among connectivity frameworks in the region. So what are the basic principles? So respect for sovereign equality, respect for territorial integrity, respect for political independence, non-interference in internal affairs, non-aggression, peaceful coexistence. So BIMSTEC working structure, the summit, the ministerial meeting, the sectoral ministerial meetings, the senior official meetings, the BIMSTEC permanent working committee. So importance of BIMSTEC. So BIMSTEC accounts for 22% of the world population, combined GDP of $2.7 trillion. So one-fourth of the world's traded goods across the bay every year. So six focus areas basically for BIMSTEC: trade, technology, energy, transport, tourism and fisheries. So more about the news. The other existing regional forum, SARC, is defunct since 2014. Experts believe that with the current geopolitical situation, there is a need to find an alternative to SARC. For this, BIMSTEC is seen as the right choice for India. How BIMSTEC is better than SARC? Inclusivity. BIMSTEC is more inclusive in nature. Article 6 of the recently signed BIMSTEC Charter refers to the admission of new members to the group, which can be used for including members like Maldives. SARC has no such provisions. Approach: BIMSTEC is more homogeneous in approach. The members are focused on the betterment in economic and technical spheres, and there are no obstructionist players like Pakistan in the grouping as in SARC. So policy focus: BIMSTEC is in the right direction to aid our Act East goals with initiatives like transport connectivity, trade agreement. The forum acts as a gateway for India to reach the ASEAN countries. Whereas India's connectivity to the Central Asia is still a distinct dream due to the obstructions from Pakistan, which has always voted such connectivity moves through SARC. Balance of power. BIMSTEC has two regional powers, India and Thailand, act as the two influential powers in the group, and the smaller members countries have reduced fear of dominance from one particular country, whereas the smaller countries of SAARC are marred by the fear of dominance of India. Trade and development. Trade among the BIMSTEC member countries reached 6% in just a decade, while in SAARC, despite an FTA, it has remained around 5% since its inception. So, compared to SAARC, BIMSTEC has greater trade potential for India and its ambitions. Existing relations. BIMSTEC membership relationship is cordial. Members maintain reasonably friendly relations, and pupil-to-pupil ties is also improving. Whereas SAARC member countries suffer for mistrust and suspicion over one another, which is not favorable condition for betterment. So guys, significance of BIMSTEC for India. Connecting link. The grouping acts as a connecting link for achieving two prominent foreign policies of India, namely Neighborhood First policy and the Act East policy. Bridging to the Northeast. The landlocked Northeast region can be developed better with cooperation from member countries of the forum like Bangladesh and Myanmar. Several connectivity projects like Kaladan Multimodal Transit Transport project can fasten the pace of Northeast development. It can also reduce its internal strifes in Northeast, as the extremist groups of Northeast use the neighboring countries as their hideouts. Booster to blue economic goals. The Bay of Bengal region can be made a secure piracy-free zone with active participation from the members of the forum. Countering the Chinese influence. Except for India and Bhutan, all other BIMSTEC nations are part of China-led Belt and Road Initiative. India can positively influence the member countries to help establish a similar initiative for Indian products to reach for Far East. Challenges pertaining to BIMSTEC. Prolonged delay in achieving a FTA free trade agreement. It has been years since the framework agreement for FTA was signed, and only 2 out of the essential 7 agreements have reached the final stage. Physical infrastructure. The BIMSTEC regions another drawback is poor road and rail connectivity. Inefficient last Insufficient last mile links and cumbersome customs and clearance procedures hampers trade and pupil to pupil interactions. Different aspirations of the members. The member countries are conducting negotiations with different goals in mind. For instance, Myanmar is marred with its internal political crisis and the Rohingya refugee crisis. Bhutan is protective about the conservation of its environment and against developmental projects, and Sri Lanka is in turmoil of both economic and political crisis. No consensus on BIMSTEC Development Fund. The technical team formed to finalize the modalities of the BIMSTEC Development Fund is yet to achieve any consensus. Untapped business to business collaborations. Currently, the group's initiatives are mostly led by the officials and experts. This needs to be expanded to the business bodies as well. So, what is the way forward? Enhancing connections and connectivity, strengthening people to people ties through cultural ties, special visa agreements between the member countries, concluding on the free trade agreement, or create a dispute resolution mechanisms. So, enhancing connections and connectivity. This can be done by encouraging people to people contacts and simultaneously accelerating work on the already started multilateral connectivity projects. So, the second is strengthening people to people ties through cultural ties. The region integration can be achieved by uses of common cultural traits like Buddhism and uses of soft power diplomacy. So, special visa agreement between member countries. Special visa for the region on the line of Schengen visa of the Europe, which enables better tourism business to business interactions. Concluding on the FTA, free trade agreement will lead to better trade interactions between the countries and will take the grouping interaction to next level. Create a dispute resolution mechanisms. Providing an efficient dispute redressal mechanisms will enhance the confidence of business houses in current cross-boundary investments, thereby integrating the region better. So our next topic is India's US China triangle. So why news? The 18th edition of Yuddha Abhyas, guys, the annual India-US military exercise concluded recently in Uttarakhand. So more in news. Since the exercise was conducted at just 100 kilometers away from the LAC, the Chinese government raises contention. China has claimed that India has violated the 1993 and 1996 agreements on LAC and also advised the US not to interfere in India-China relations. Experts point that the relations between these three superstates are very important for the coming world. 1993 and 1996 India-China agreements है ना. In 1993 agreement, both sides agreed to strictly respect and observe the line of actual control between the two sides, to keep the military forces in the areas along the line of actual control to a minimum level, not to undertake military exercises in mutually identified zones. Each side shall give the other prior notification of military exercises of specified levels near the line of actual control. In 1996 agreement, they agreed that neither side shall use its military capability against the other side. No armed forces deployed by either side in the border areas along the line of actual control. So triangle relationship and India, US, China. In a triangle setup, the way country A deals with country B will affect country C's behavior indirectly or directly due to the established model of interaction among the three parties. The preconditions for a triangular relationship are that each player recognizes the strategic silence of the three principals, and the relationship between any two will be affected by each player's relationship to the third. With the current dynamics of India-US-China triangle, it is still in its evolving stage as both divergence and convergence exist amidst their relations. A triangle relationship will not exist among three parties when two parties are friends or allies, with the third being their common enemy. So areas of divergence in India-US-China triangle: the conflicting foreign policies, India's apparent closeness to USA, challenging high hegemony, China's Belt and Road Initiative, the power struggle, China's stance in multilateral forums, China's using trade as its weapon. The conflicting foreign policies. China sees India's Tibet policy and USA Taiwan policy as hindrance to its sovereign territorial claims. Similarly, India is egged by China's close alliance with Pakistan through its military and economic ties. USA sees China as an immediate threat to its superpower status. India's apparent closeness to USA. China sees India's closeness to USA as an issue. For instance, US designated India as a major defense partner and provided India with strategic trade authorization tier 1 status. The two countries have already signed four defense cooperation agreements between them, namely JSOMIA, LAMOA, CISMOA, BICA, है ना, General Security of Military Information Agreement, Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, Communication and Information Security Memorandum of Agreement, Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. Challenging hegemony. China wants to exert its influence over the Indo-Pacific region by displacing the position of India in the region and has plans to encircle India through its string of pearls. It also has meticulous plans to displace the positions of USA in world order. India-US engagement in the Quad group is also an irritant to China. China has been aggressive in the region, for instance, issues with Southeast Asian nations with respect to South China Sea. So China's Belt and Road Initiative, since its inspection in 2013, the examples highlight that China has used it as a debt trap and cripple the other country's economy for its own benefits. The power struggle. China considers India as its Asian rival, which poses the inherent capacity to halt its hegemonistic ambitions in Asia. Similarly, it sees USA as its global rival, whereas both India and USA see China in the prism of an aggressor who intrudes into their sovereignty. China's stance in multilateral forums. China's stance with respect to keeping India away from important multilateral forums like the Nuclear Supplier Group and UNSC is evidently visible. Whereas USA is trying to include India as a member in the same forums to balance China.